Welcome back, class. Today I'm going to give you a very fast review of American history before the Civil War. This is so you can understand where the United States has been, how did it get to an issue that there's a major civil war at hand, and we're going to pick up with the Civil War next week. But this is the United States history from 1492 to the Civil War. It's going to be really fast. You don't need to know this for any quiz or test, so don't worry about taking notes. Just pay attention enough to answer the 4 questions that are in your What Did I Miss reflection for today. You ready? Let's go. Starting off, we are going to be talking about the Native Americans, and to honor the occasion, I am wearing my original Founding Fathers t-shirt. Thousands of years ago, late in the Ice Age, humans journeyed across the Bering Land Bridge from Asia into Alaska. Their descendants explored along the west coast of North America. These Native Americans, or Indians, had covered nearly the entire continent. American Indians have developed a wide range of languages, customs, and civilizations. Think of all the different languages and customs that are in the continent of Europe. There's twice that many when it comes to Native Americans. Some tribes in Mexico cultivated corn and squash. Some raised turkeys, yeah, the actual bird, llamas. Some raised guinea pigs for food. Some hunted deer, others hunted bison. The Europeans invaded America, beginning with Columbus' voyage to the New World in 1492. The Europeans brought diseases with them, including smallpox and measles. These unfamiliar diseases spread quickly among the native population. They wiped out the population of many native cities. Some historians estimate that almost 90% of the natives were wiped out after contact with Europeans. However, there are still plenty of Americans today that are descended from these early Native Americans. Oh, costume change with the arrival of the Europeans. Following Columbus's Caribbean landing in 1492, numerous European nations competed for territory in North America, dragging African slaves and Native Americans into fray. The land that one day would become the United States served as a grand chessboard in this geopolitical struggle between England, Spain, Portugal, and France. A struggle that lasted some 2.5 centuries. That's longer than the United States has since existed. The New World was up for grabs, and whoever could plant their flag there first were the new owners, despite the fact that there were already people there. England's own colonies were themselves a mixed bag. You had the Puritans coming from New England to establish a state church that would shame the Church of England into reform. Further south, along the Chesapeake and into the Carolinas, slave-based agriculture was more important than religion. Slavery was defining the social order of the time. What all of these English settlers had in common was their mother country of England and good King George III. Tensions between the colonies and the monarchy began to grow as the colonies began to petition for the right to a locally elected representative government. This will become the colonists' legacy to the founding fathers of the United States and the founders' legacy to the world. Costume change yet again. After a long series of imperial wars, which hardly gave advantage to any of the participants, a decisive British victory at last was achieved in the 7 Years' War, also known in America as the French and Indian War. France was virtually evicted from the New World, with Spain possessing some land in the lower half of North America, and Britain possessing everything between the eastern seaboard and the Mississippi River. Britain's American colonies had fought alongside imperial soldiers, sharing a patriotic unity that never had been stronger, nor would it ever be again. The British Empire will soon find itself defeated by a veteran of the French and Indian War, George Washington. Saddled with the debt of the French and Indian War, and now with more territory to protect than ever before, Britain sought a new way to raise revenue. Tax the colonies! The Stamp Act of 1765 taxed for revenue, and it enforced the collection. If you want a deck of cards, there's a tax for that. If you want that newspaper, there's a tax for that. If you want that marriage license, yep, there's a tax for that. When King George III refused to hear the colonist appeals, the Americans united in July 1776 to declare their independence. The Second Continental Congress designated General George Washington as commander of the patriotic forces. In 1777, American soldiers secured a victory at Saratoga that attracted an alliance with France. Bolstered by French money, the Americans forced a British surrender at Yorktown in 1781. The world's greatest empire at the time lost her greatest colony as the American Republic, the United States, was born. The young nation now had to form a new kind of government. They wrote the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. They established a Congress with representatives from each state. And instead of a king, the American people will elect their first president. The presidential electors unanimously selected George Washington as the nation's first leader under the new Constitution. The new U.S. Constitution was very careful of how it acknowledged the institution of slavery. In the South, the economy was dependent on slavery. There was a huge demand for American cotton in Europe, and the South needed slaves to harvest this huge demand for cotton. Though the U.S. Congress outlawed the African slave trade in 1808, slaves were still being sold within the United States. Slave owners could sell and separate children from their parents, and there was very little done to stop someone from kidnapping a free black person in the North and selling them down south into slavery. And the enslaved population in the U.S. nearly tripled over the next 50 years. By 1860, it had reached nearly 4 million slaves. In the North, there was a growing abolitionist movement, a movement to free all the African slaves. America was growing and adding new states all the time. There was a delicate balance in Congress between the number of free states and the number of slave states. Slave states were worried that if there were more states that outlawed slavery, they could pass a law that will make slavery illegal for the entire country. When Missouri wanted to become a state in 1820, a bitter debate broke out. War was about to happen, but Missouri was the first of many compromises to happen. Missouri was admitted to the Union as a slave state, and they brought in Maine at the same time, making it a free state, so the balance was the same. Although the Missouri Compromise was designed to maintain an even balance between slave and free states, it was able to help prevent war from breaking out, but only temporarily. Now you are caught up. We will pick up next week with how African slaves made a run for their own freedom in the Underground Railroad, and eventually how this tense debate over slavery will lead to America's bloodiest war.
What did I miss? What did I miss?